You're a winner this winter when you play Borgata's Winning Wonderland. From now through December 28th, earn entries in slot and table games for your stake in over $1 million in prizes, including two 2025 Land Rover Range Rovers, each valued at over $150,000. Drawings take place every Saturday, with grand prize drawings on November 30th and December 28th. For details, visit theborgata.com. Winning Wonderland, only at Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa, alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Sofi Stadium, gearing up for the Eagles' Sunday night matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Olivia. I feel like every week you ask me how I'm doing, but I feel like I need to ask you how you're doing. You had a big birthday over the weekend, so yeah, I think you are the star of the show every week, but especially this week as our resident birthday host.
You're flipping the script on me, EJ. I appreciate that. I had a great day yesterday. Got to celebrate my birthday with some family in town, so that was really special, a unique circumstance. I don't get to experience that for most road games, but I'm happy to be back here in LA and getting to visit this really beautiful stadium too. It's a lot of fun to come out here. So, and a fun matchup. There's a lot to talk about, and we'll get into some of that toward the as we continue in our show today. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about the fact that you can be part of our conversation. Everyone out there watching, if you are over on inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, you can head over there. Leave us a question or comment, whatever is on your mind. We would love to hear from you, and we'll answer some of your questions toward the end of our show today. So we look forward to engaging with you in just a little bit. All right, EJ, we've got a lot to discuss as it relates to the health of both teams, particularly the Eagles. We'll start with them. DeVonta Smith has been ruled out ahead of today's game, dealing with a hamstring injury, something that he has been kind of navigating since the Jacksonville Jaguars game. Right after that game, he popped up on the injury report first with a hamstring injury, and so for the last few weeks, he's been dealing with it, was able to play these last 2 weeks, and now today, unable to go. It's a big loss there for the Eagles offense. He is one of their top receivers behind A.J. Brown. How do you envision this Eagles passing game kind of trying to compensate for the loss of DeVonta Smith in today's game?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, takes away a facet of that passing game. We've seen the Eagles kind of reach their ceiling as a passing game, at least for this season, kind of leaning on the wide receivers' ability to win matchups on the outside. A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith are a big part of that. So, yeah, losing half of that equation definitely changes the complexion. You might see A.J. Brown get more attention paid to him because of the fact that DeVonta Smith isn't there to kind of balance things out, across the formation on the other side of the formation typically, or, if DeVonta and AJ were lined up on the other side, that kind of creates a lot of gravity to one side of the field as well. So definitely changes how the Eagles offense presents pre-snap. I mean, DeVonta hadn't been getting a lot of targets in the last few games, so I think there is, something to be said about the fact that like their passing game can still be quite effective without him. But yeah, it kind of puts the onus on the other guys to kind of be able to win those matchups in the way that A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith do so reliably.
We'll see who's able to step up in the absence of Smith. Perhaps it is Dallas Goedert, who had a big game here last year against the Rams, or maybe it'll be a Jahan Dotson, a Johnny Wilson, who have been coming on in recent weeks, gaining a little bit more trust with Jalen Hurts as the season progresses. Another notable change to this lineup is the fact that Britton Covey is back. He has been on injured reserve for the last 7 games after he broke his shoulder blade. Ouch. Against the New Orleans Saints. Finally, he returns to the lineup. And the big question is not so much what type of role he'll have immediately on offense. Perhaps they'll try to work him in gradually. But I'm most curious to know, EJ, whether or not Covey will resume his spot as the first string punt returner in place of Cooper DeJean, who had been filling in for him and doing a really good job at that. Although we know last year, Britton Covey was one of the best punt returners in the league, averaging, I believe, 14.4 yards per punt return, number 2 in the league. If you are making the decisions, if you are Michael Clay, would you give the job back to Britton Covey, or would you let Cooper DeJean continue to ride that hot hand?
Yeah, if I was putting on my special teams coordinator hat for the day, I probably would put Britton Covey back there just because, like, I've been around this team long enough to see some shaky returners and some guys who maybe didn't have as much juice in the return game. Greg Ward comes to mind as somebody who didn't always have the best returns, but he was at least very sure-handed catching the football on those punts. So I think that, again, I've been at enough Michael Clay press conferences to know that the first part about punt returning is fielding the punt cleanly and reliably. And I think that Britton Covey, he is, I think at the very least, he's very sure-handed back there. Not to say Cooper DeJean wasn't sure-handed back there. He's been mostly fine back there, but I do think there have been a couple occasions where you can kind of see his inexperience show, whether it's, waving for the fair catch late, or just maybe a little catching the ball without being totally settled underneath it. I think that Britton Covey, kind of like that experience level that he brings, is definitely like a little bit of a reassurance for a special teams coordinator. And like you mentioned, he's also been very productive as a returner. Now, I think that there might be an interesting question about having Cooper DeJean and Britton Covey kind of splitting that role at times. Maybe a stylistic advantage in having Cooper DeJean, who can kind of get downhill and be a little bit more physical, while Britton Covey has been talking about managing his hits a little bit. Maybe he needs to go out of bounds a few more times to protect his his broken shoulder, recently healed shoulder. So yeah, I do. I think that Britton Covey would probably be my choice, but I do think that there might still be a window for Cooper DeJean to have an impact in that role at times this season.
We have not asked Vic Fangio yet for his opinion. After all, it's not his decision. That said, I think if he were asked, he probably wouldn't be so mad to see Britton Covey resume that spot. He was not so jazzed about Cooper DeJean in that role to begin with, and understandably so. He's playing a really important role in this Eagles defense right now as the starting nickel cornerback, and to have him go down, God forbid, on a punt return, I don't think Vic Fangio would be very happy. So that's not to say that the Eagles want to see Britton Covey go down, on offense or anything like that either. So that's the challenge of having a punt returner who also has other roles in either the offense or the defense. It just kind of is what it is. But we'll see what direction they decide to go to today. As far as practice squad elevations for the Eagles, tight end CJ Uzoma is back up today. He was also up last week as the third tight end behind Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra. And then we're still waiting on the Rams inactives right now. Rob Havenstein, the starting right tackle, was listed as doubtful going into today's game with an ankle injury, so that could potentially be a substantial loss for the Rams along the offensive line. We will keep an eye on that as we get through the rest of our show. All right, EJ, let us talk about some of the latest headlines, the big news, buzzy topics going into today's game, and there are certainly a lot of them for a very interesting Los Angeles Rams team. Do not let their 5-5 record fool you. This has been a team that has improved mightily since week 8 when Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua came back into the lineup after dealing with some injuries earlier in the season. This passing offense in particular has been really strong with the two of them back in the offense. Passing offense ranks second in the league in yards and third in touchdowns since week 8. And what makes this offense so unique, led by head coach Sean McVay, is the fact that it incorporates so much motion before the snap, at the snap, multiple motions. And particularly they use both Kupp and Nacua in motion quite a lot. And I think that could potentially present some unique challenges to a particularly young defensive core, especially, at corner, you've got a relatively inexperienced inside linebacker core. How do you think they're going to need to play facing the McVay offense and a lot of the motions that they use?
Yeah, I think that a thing we heard throughout the week was kind of being disciplined pre-snap, winning pre-snap in order to be able to manage post-snap. Basically, you need to be able to, whether it's being disciplined against the motion or kind of sort it out quickly, be able to communicate quickly and understand everybody's assignment, because that's really what Sean McVay likes to do. It's funny. I remember being here last year. I remember each of these Eagles-Rams matchups, or even the matchups between the Eagles and the 49ers. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan runs a similar scheme. You end up talking a lot about the Eagles linebackers and, how these schemes do like to put these linebackers into a bind. They like to manipulate their eyes and kind of get them looking one direction and kind of take advantage of the fact that they might be undisciplined in those areas. honestly, the Eagles linebacking core has been good enough this year that there is reason for a little bit of confidence, maybe some optimism about them handling these assignments. But as you mentioned, they're still an inexperienced group. They probably will see things today that they haven't seen, in their careers at linebacker. At the very least, they'll be tested in a way that is pretty rare week in and week out for, a guy like Zach Bond who hasn't played a lot of off-ball linebacker in the NFL. So it'll be a real challenge. It'll be a challenge for Cooper DeJean. You hear a lot about how Cooper DeJean is, wise beyond his years on the field. He's somebody who doesn't make the same mistake twice and can kind of process things. But again, he's going to see some things that are pretty unique to this McVay offense, I would imagine tonight. So yeah, it'll definitely be a challenge. I mean, the Eagles defense is playing so well that it's hard to, have, serious major concerns about how they might sort these things out, but it is a different thing, when you're looking at how this young secondary has fared against some really good receiving combinations. It might give you some confidence in a matchup like this, but it's a very unique way that those wide receivers are deployed. The offense in general is, again, maybe unique isn't always the best word because of the fact that McVay, it has been copied so much, but there, we've learned throughout the Eagles, pursuit of defensive coordinators that sometimes it's like you'd rather have the author than the imitations. So yeah, it'll definitely be a challenge. I think that it's going to be tough for some of these guys to kind of sort that out.
Well, you can't have a strong passing game without a talented passer, a talented quarterback, and the Rams have that in 36-year-old Matthew Stafford, former teammate of Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore and Eagles cornerback Darius Slay, which is like kind of mind-blowing and difficult to wrap your head around. But he has really excelled naturally since Kupp and Nacua came back into the lineup, especially when targeting those guys downfield. He ranks third in the league right now in downfield passing yards. However, a big Achilles heel, if you will, is the fact that Stafford hasn't handled pressure very well this season. And by the way, Rob Havenstein is inactive for today, so that's a big loss along the offensive line and a big loss on this particular topic and handling that pressure. Stafford has registered his lowest completion percentage since at least 2018 when facing pressure, 47.3%. And get this is fairly mind-blowing. He has 0 scramble attempts this year on 370 dropbacks. I can't even fathom how that is possible, courtesy of Next Gen Stats. Naturally, if you are the Eagles defensive front, you're going to want to start getting Matthew Stafford under pressure today. What is the key to trying to get him to sweat a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely gotten older. I remember watching him at Georgia and early in his career with the Lions where he was able to extend plays with his feet. Obviously, he's a little bit more statuesque, I think is probably a fair word for it. So, I mean, we've talked before about mobile quarterbacks where you have to be disciplining your rush lanes and you have to make sure that, you're not giving them an outlet. I don't think you have to worry about that as much with Matt Stafford. I think, with a quarterback like him, though, I do think it's key to get interior pressure, because you hear a lot about veteran quarterbacks and their ability to kind of step up into the pocket to avoid edge rush. So I think that, he's the type of guy that can do that. I think, again, when it's interior pressure, there's really nowhere for them to go. There is no outlet. So, again, maybe it's letting Jalen Carter and some of these other guys be more aggressive, getting upfield and, in pursuit of Matthew Stafford. I think that is kind of the great equalizer is when, you don't have a clean pocket right in front of your face. It kind of changes the complexion of the entire game.
Absolutely. On the flip side now, this Rams defense looks a lot different right now. The fact that Aaron Donald will not be going up against this team, most likely a welcome change for Nick Sirianni, although the Eagles had historically been very good against Aaron Donald. That said, this Rams defensive front has done fairly well in his absence, and a lot of that hinges on the success of rookie defensive end Jared Verse and defensive tackle Braden Fisk, both players drafted this year, first and second rounds respectively, out of Florida State. So former teammate of Johnny Wilson. Spoke to Wilson in the locker room this week. He has some maybe not so fond memories of going up against Jared Verse in practice, and he said he got destroyed once on a chip block. Definitely learned how competitive Jared Verse is in practice and just the kind of player and competitor that he is. Both players have had a lot of success this year in generating pressure right now, not just among rookies, but just in general. Verse ranks 4th in the league in pressures with 57. He's got 4.5 sacks. Fisk, is third on the team with 5 sacks. So been very productive, generating pressure up front. And the Rams as a collective have also just in general been very good at this. They've pressured opposing passers on 41.9% of dropbacks this season, which is the highest rate in the NFL, again, according to Next Gen Stats. How confident are you, EJ, in Jalen Hurts and this offensive line, their ability to set protections and have hot answers if they're facing the blitz, if need be?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I'm not entirely confident in this group being able to do that. We've seen them have their struggles against that this season. Obviously, Jalen Hurts has been better against the blitz this season in general. Handling pressure, I think he has handled it better this year. But in the last couple of weeks, especially, we've seen him struggle at times. The first half against the Cowboys really stands out as a time where, he was sacked 5 times and a half, and we saw him have a tendency to drop his eyes, square himself to the line of scrimmage, kind of feel and anticipate that pressure before it was even actually, apparent, before he had to, I would say. We've seen him get jittery, kind of get out of rhythm in the passing game because of the pressure. So I think that's going to be one of the keys of the game. If the Eagles can kind of handle those, those talented pass rushers, as you mentioned, if they can handle that, I think that they might be able to get the passing game, kind of going. But we've seen it struggle when, I think that the thing that has really kind of, plagued it throughout the season is when Jalen Hurts isn't in sync, when he is starting to feel a little jittery back there. So, yeah, I think that's going to be huge for them. And I honestly, if you're asking my confidence level, I would say I don't want to spoil anything, but I do think that is one of my major concerns going into the game. So I wouldn't say I'm greatly confident that they'll be able to sort it out.
All right. Well, I'm eager to hear what your prediction will be, but we're not there yet. We've got to answer some of your questions and some of the things that are on your mind, everyone. So if you left us a comment over on the Inquirer website, thank you so much. Let's start with this comment from Ace Pilot. They say that the Eagles had a big win against the Commanders on Thursday night last week. The Ravens are up next week and a trip to the West Coast for this game. Rams team playing better than their record. Feels like a trap game. Hope not. We will see. This is going to be, as we've been discussing going into this stretch, this is a tough set of games for the Eagles, and they completed one big challenge in going up against the Commanders, who, by the way, lost today. So that's a big, to the Cowboys. So take that how you may, although the Cowboys are pretty far back in the division. So good news there for the Eagles. But when you look at these next 2 games, EJ, between the Rams, the Ravens, these are 2 teams that are very talented. How would you feel splitting these games? Do you think the Eagles would feel good about that? Or I guess, how do you feel kind of about these next couple games for the team?
Yeah, I feel like we have learned a lot about the team, so far this season, but I think that this stretch upcoming is going to teach us even more about how they handle different types of, elite teams in the NFL. I don't know if you'd really call the Rams quite an elite team, but I do think that they have some things that, will present challenges to the Eagles. And, again, like we mentioned with the pressure and kind of like this passing game and how unique it is, I feel like there are some things that we will take away from this game, and then obviously next week is kind of its own beast with the Ravens offense playing the way that they are. So yeah, I do. I think that the next 2 games, honestly, if you told me they split them, I think that they would take that. Going into those games, like if you said if you could fast forward 2 weeks and be 1-1 in those 2 games, I think most people would take that. These are 2 teams that should present challenges, especially. I kind of agree with the commenter. I think this game does have a little bit of an element of a trap game. This is a team that is playing better than the record. Like you said, they've won 4 of their last 5 games. It's a tough road trip, and they're, again, there's a tough stretch kind of like leading into this that, you might be victim of looking too far ahead.
One advantage that the Eagles may have going into a long West Coast trip are the fans in attendance. I'm looking around right now at the stadium, and I will say there's not a lot of bodies in the stands just yet, but there is quite a bit of green. So we'll see how things continue to fill out as we get closer and closer to kickoff. All right. Thank you so much, Ace Pilot. Let's take this question from R. Chang. They say that the team's on-field culture on defense is far superior to last year. Much better tackling, wrapping the arms, rallying to the ball. Honestly, you could even make that, you can apply that third point there to the offense as well, as evidenced by Grant Calcaterra and his biggest play of the game, in my opinion, his major fumble recovery this past week against the Commanders and bailing Dallas Goedert out, if you will. But that said, we have seen the Eagles continuously, since the bye week especially, improve in those areas, whether it be cutting down on those missed tackles. And I think the missed tackles and just kind of having a nose for the ball, being in the right place at the right time, which has resulted in more takeaways for this team. What do you feel like is at the root of those changes coming out of the bye week?
Yeah, I think that obviously it's hard to understate Cooper DeJean's, integration into things. And I mean, beyond that, like the tackling, I mean, something Saquon Barkley said a couple of weeks ago has kind of been in the back of my head with thinking about that type of thing, which is that he said like the first 4 weeks almost felt like the preseason for them, with the Brazil trip and the travel and everything else. I don't think that it's fair to, I don't think we need to make excuses for them, about the way that the season started in terms of logistical stuff with the travel. But I do think looking back at it, like, how poorly they tackled against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, before the bye week, and then how much better they've looked in those areas since the bye. I think that there might be something to like them kind of knocking off the cobwebs a little bit. Now, maybe that says something about the way the Eagles practice in training camp. Maybe that says something about the way they approach the beginning of the season. But yeah, I do think that maybe those two things stick out to me. And, by the way, since we're talking about Grant Calcaterra, I love a shameless plug. You should go over to Inquirer.com and read my story about Grant Calcaterra. He has a pretty, I would say one-of-a-kind journey to the NFL in terms of EMT training, medically retiring from football and returning to it. You can read all about that at Inquirer.com. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but yeah, make sure to click on my story and give it some love. I would appreciate it. So
highly recommend. It was an awesome read, really interesting, and just what an incredible journey for Grant Calcaterra. Truly remarkable that, really culminated here in LA too. So highly recommend you check that out over on Inquirer.com. All right, EJ, let us transition into our player picks. A lot of important players going to be taking part in today's game. However, if you had to pick one that you are most eager to watch, who would you pick?
I'm going to be watching the same guy that everybody else is going to be watching, and that's Saquon Barkley. We mentioned the pressure, or how Jalen Hurts handling that pressure is going to be really important. And I think that we've seen a lot of times this season that Jalen Hurts' play is kind of secondary to the fact that that Saquon Barkley has been able to take over games and really just impact games to a level that honestly I didn't expect to see from him. When they signed him, I knew that he was a really good player, but I didn't know quite how often he'd be able to turn a game on its head with, a run that he shouldn't be able to break for, 50, 60 yards. And I think, in a game like this where you maybe don't feel great about the Eagles' ability to sort out pressure looks and handle pressure in the passing game, Saquon Barkley can be the great equalizer. We haven't seen Jalen Hurts need to win very many games, by dropping back 40 or 50 times a game. That's because of Saquon Barkley. So if he's able to do that again tonight, I think that kind of, again, changes the whole complexion of the game. So, I'll be keeping an eye on him. Like I said, everybody else will be too.
Of course. Good pick. Safe pick. I'm also going to take a pretty safe pick in my eyes. I'll go with Jalen Carter. As we've already discussed on this show, pressure is going to be a huge part of today's game and trying to rattle Matthew Stafford, get him on the move or not, try to take him down in the pocket and just kind of disrupt things up front. And Carter could potentially play a really big role in that. He's coming off of a really incredible game for him. He played 100% of the defensive snaps for the first time in his career. Now, the big question to me is, how is he going to respond from that game? Think back to last year when the Eagles played the Bills toward the, in the beginning of that latter third of the season, and Carter played a ton of snaps. Davis played a ton of snaps, and they both kind of tailed off after that. Is this going to be a repeat of last year, or Jalen Carter in year two? Is he wiser now than he was then, in better shape than he was then? I'll be really curious to see how he fares. But overall, he has been incredibly productive this season. He's the only defensive tackle, according to Next Gen Stats, who has generated multiple pressures in every game that they have played this season, which is no small feat. So if the Eagles can get him going, get him after Matthew Stafford, I think that is going to be a huge difference maker in today's game. All right, let us transition into our predictions for the game. And to help us make our predictions, I am pleased to welcome in Inquirer reporter Jeff McClain. Jeff, it's great to see you. Before you get into your prediction, which I'm very eager to hear what you have to say, I'm very curious what matchup really excites you in today's contest.
Well, excites maybe a little bit of a reach, but the Vic Fangio, Sean McVay matchup is probably one that deserves a lot of attention and a lot. I think a lot of what happens here tonight will depend upon how Fangio is successful or not versus McVay and vice versa. There was kind of a narrative that started about six years ago, I think it was, when Fangio was with the Bears and the defensive coordinator, and he did a very good job of stopping what was then probably the best offense in the NFL, the Rams, in a December game. And to keep it relatively brief here, Fangio had done something with his front to really stop what the Rams do on the ground, and that was something that Bill Belichick later on, when the Super Bowl came around, that he kind of stole that idea. It's kind of a 6-man front, and that really kind of messed with McVay's offense again, and then they didn't really score any points basically in that game. I think that game wasn't here. The Rams won here in 21, but yeah. So and Fangio was asked about this during the press conference this past week, and he's like, "Well, it's been quite a long time." So he didn't want to make much of it, but and I think there's some truth to that too. I mean, this is going to be about matchups. This is going to be about the personnel that you have now versus the way they had then, and then plus McVay does things a little differently on the ground with his run offense. There isn't as much stretch zone attacking. They're a little more smash mouth, and I think with that type of front, it's easier kind of just to run those basic concepts. But the real question, I think, with McVay's offense is just always the pre-snap motion, the motion at the snap. I don't think there's another team in the NFL that runs as much of it, especially with multiple players moving at the same time, and that makes it very difficult on a defense. It stresses them. It stresses the middle field defender guys and their eye discipline. They can't be fooled by that eye candy, and that'll focus primarily on the safeties, Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Zach Bond and Kobe Dean. And EJ, I heard you mention this earlier. You're right. I think those two linebackers are going to be stressed, and I think the Eagles' success in stopping not only the run game but certainly the passing attack with Cooper Kupp and Paku Nakua is going to come down to how the linebackers are able to kind of play their zones and do what they need to do in terms of their responsibilities in the middle of the field, because that's where Stafford loves to throw the ball. And it's going to be a tough test for them. And it's going to be arguably their toughest test that they've faced the entire season.
All of that in mind, who do you have winning today's game, and what is your final score prediction?
Geez, I wish I remember. I think I have it close. I think I have the Eagles winning by like 3 points, 20, or maybe it's 4, 27-23. And I don't feel super confident about it. In fact, I if you ask me now, I feel like this is like upset city. That the Rams can pull this off, and I don't like to play too much into the the narratives that are built around like a trap game, etc. But the Rams aren't a 5-5 team. They're, to me, when you're looking at this team and what they have here, they're a 4-1 team, because that's basically what they've done over these last 5 games since they got both those wide receivers back. So Stafford, as you guys mentioned earlier, he's not as athletic. He's never really kind of athletic in terms of on the ground, but he's just not as mobile. Pressure has been getting to him. But if he can get that ball out quickly, and and the Eagles can't take away that first read, I think it's going to be tough for this defense. All that being said, I mean, the Eagles do have a lot of talent. They're playing well. The Devontae Smith injury is going to hurt them. They won here last year. A lot of similar players. So, I'm sticking with the Eagles. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't feel super confident about it.
Well, EJ, you already kind of alluded to where your head's at for this game, the fact that you're not so confident right now and how Jalen Hurts is dealing with pressure. With that in mind, who are you picking for today's game?
Yeah, I guess I'm population 1 at Upset City today. I have the Rams winning 23-21. I feel similarly to Jeff in terms of I don't really feel great either way. But I do think that this, the travel, again, I think that there are some makings of maybe not a trap game, like what Jeff said, but just I think that maybe what I'm getting at is the fact that this Rams team is pretty good. I don't think that necessarily their recent stretch has been more impressive than maybe the aggregate of the season. So yeah, I think that the Eagles could clearly win this game. I think if Saquon Barkley has a great game, or if Jalen Hurts just handles pressure better than he has in the last couple of weeks, I feel a lot better about it. But I think that this has the makings of a stodgy game. Maybe early, low scoring early, and kind of like I said, I think that the pressure and the passing game might be a big factor here. So yeah, I have the Rams 23-21.
All right. My final score prediction before knowing that Smith was going to be inactive was Eagles 27, Rams 24. I'm going to stick with it. I feel similarly uneasy about that final score prediction and whether or not the Eagles are even going to win today's game. That said, I still feel good about the Eagles passing game, even in the absence of Devontae Smith. I think they've got a good amount of firepower there still with A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. We'll see if some of the depth receivers are able to step up. But even without the big names there, this Rams secondary isn't the most formidable group. They have conceded 6.9 yards per passing play, which is the fourth most in the NFL. I think that this could potentially be a big day for Dallas Goedert once again, as he had one this. It was week 5 last year. So we'll see exactly what happens. I don't feel so great about my final score prediction, but this is an important game for the Rams in particular. I think if they lose this game, their shot at making the playoffs goes down substantially. So they're going to be desperate, and this isn't going to be an easy one for the Eagles by any means. So we'll see how it goes. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us at Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa. As always, we want to chat with you throughout the game as it continues. So head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. We'll be interacting with you, answering your questions, chatting about, I don't know, snacks you're eating at home, whatever it may be. So we look forward to seeing you over there.
Coverage on the Uncovering the Birds podcast. New episodes released every week. Listen to wherever you get your podcasts or go to inquirer.com/podcasts.
Once again, that's all for today, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into Game Day Central, and we'll see you next time.